Good evening and welcome to Meet the Populace. My name is Lady Venkatavyani and I'm your host. Meet the Populace is a series of interviews featuring the members of the SCA in the Kingdom of Midrealm. Tonight I would like to welcome, I guess it's Master Andreas now. Would you like to tell us your full name and appropriate title at this point and where about in the Midrealm you play?
So my name is Andreas Blacwode. And my title officially now is Magister. I'm a Pelican as of 3 days ago. Magister is the appropriate Latin title that I picked, which is appropriate for my persona, which is a Norman clerk in England about 150 years after the, about 150 years after the conquest.
Well, congratulations. I actually saw your elevation on the ethereal court, and that's an amazing accomplishment and well-deserved.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I live in the barony of Aryton in the Midrealm, which is Chicago area. I live west of Chicago in Aurora.
Okay. So you're on the other side of the lake from me.
Yes.
Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Sure. Thank you.
So we do like to start these out with kind of origin stories. Everybody loves a good origin story. It's always one of those stories we share around, which is, how did you find out about the SCA and how did you get involved? Sure.
So I was in college, and girl I was dating was going to meetings. She wasn't really in the SCA, I don't think necessarily, but she was going to meetings, and so I went with her to a couple, and it didn't take me very long to figure out that this was the right place for me. And actually, most of those folks probably, I don't think many of them are in the SCA anymore. Those college kids who I joined with, but I'm still here 30 years later. So that's how I got into it.
Wow, 30 years, that's a long time.
Yes.
So
in fact, coronation was my 30th anniversary of my first event.
Oh my gosh, well, congratulations on 2 events that night.
Thanks.
30 years and your elevation.
Right.
So in all that time that you've been in the SCA, what's something that you've learned, whether it's a craft or a skill or a life lesson?
So one of the things that I think is one of the best lessons that the SCA teaches is learning how to help other people, but not learning how to help other people in the way that I think they should be helped or the way that I think it's best, but in the way that they want to be helped, right? So if you're, helping to judge somebody's ANS entry, you can talk to them about what kind of critique they want before you just launch into telling them that their zipper is not right. Or, when somebody comes to you with a problem, are they actually looking for solutions as opposed to just wanting to talk about it, right? Just get it out, vent it out. And so being in the SCA, one of the things that I've learned over the years is how best to help people, not just helping them, but helping them the way that they want to be helped.
That's actually a very valuable lesson. I've seen quite a few people where they're really legitimately trying to help, but it wasn't exactly the type of help that the person was looking for. So,
right.
So among all of the things you've learned and all the stuff you've done, do you have something that you're particularly proud of? Something you've done or something you've made, or, what makes you proud?
I can actually point to a pretty recent, a 30-year career in the SCA gives you a lot of opportunities to have things that you do that you're proud of, and honestly, a lot of things that you do that you're not so proud of necessarily, mistakes that you've made or things that you've done that weren't good. So I can speak to something that's going on right now, which is ever since the social distancing started in the Midrealm and in the mundane U.S. states that make up the Midrealm, the Royal University of the Midrealm has been running classes. We run 1 class every night on weeknights, and we run 2 classes or 3 classes sometimes on weekend days. And so we've been doing this since March 18th, and we've not had more than 2 or 3 days where there wasn't a class. And at least 2 of them were when there were courts. So, we didn't conflict with things. We specifically canceled classes so that we wouldn't conflict with courts. But we've been running with this ever since everybody started staying at home. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the administrators and the teachers who stepped up in these weird, difficult, odd times to create this environment of education in the Midrealm with these classes. Other kingdoms are doing similar but different things. But as far as I know, we are the only kingdom that has a class every day that somebody can come and join and partake in.
I've actually seen the class schedule and looked at some of those classes. They're pretty amazing classes.
Yes, there's some really, really great classes. And the wonderful thing is that the Midrealm has responded, right? We've got people coming to classes. Some of our teachers have gotten attendance at classes that they would never have gotten if they've been.
Hey, welcome back. Sorry about that. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty there, but we're going to continue on with what we were talking about. Magister Andreas, I believe you were speaking about class attendance. Would you like to continue that thought?
Yeah, we've had what I've noticed is as I run the reports, and I'm able to do that, right? I can run reports that show me how many classes have happened and how many people are attending. Get some really solid numbers. There's some classes out there that are getting attendance that probably wouldn't get as much attendance at a actual event where there's conflicts, multiple classes all happening at the same time. This way, there's a benefit to doing it this way, which is it's only one class at a time. And so probably people are checking in who would not necessarily check in every single time. And that's really exciting. So it means that people are getting exposed to things that they wouldn't normally take the time to go do or have the chance to take care of, right? Maybe they get scheduled because they're teaching and they would have a conflict, but now that doesn't happen anymore, or it doesn't happen right now. Obviously, when this is all over, the RUM will return to its normal operating procedure. My hope is that we will continue to, offer some virtual learning opportunities. There are a lot of people who have reached out to the RUM staff and talked about how, they don't get to go to a lot of events for a variety of different reasons, and they really appreciate these classes being run the way they are because it gives them an opportunity to feel like they're still part of the SCA, even though they don't get to go to events on the weekends.
That's actually, I've seen quite a bit of that, and that's actually a good thing for some of our more homebound members, or they can't travel as far. They do get to learn new skills and try new things. I think that's a fantastic idea. Right. Now, when we had briefly talked setting up this interview, you had mentioned that you were running some of the classes. What are some of your favorite classes to run?
So I really enjoy the roundtables. Mistress Hillary, who's the Baroness of Arrington, ran a peerage roundtable, and we had a lot of really good attendance for that. Again, the sort of thing that we probably wouldn't have had as many people if it wasn't in person, because we live in Arrington, which used to be the center of the kingdom, but is no longer the center of the kingdom because we don't have North Shield as a principality anymore. And so we have people from all over join and attend who didn't have a conflict, so they were able to go and be there. So that was a really fun one. And the Honorable Lady Matildis ran a wonderful scribal class from start to finish, layout to calligraphy to illumination, and she had 2 cameras, and we were able to sync back and forth between the 2 cameras, and that was a pretty cool class. Of course, Baroness Zara has been running her diversity and inclusion classes, as she's the Society Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Officer, and she has run several classes that has had a great attendance, and that's really getting out there, helping a lot of people out, I think, with some of their questions that they have about that kind of thing.
Now, you were mentioning the roundtables. For some of our members that may not know what those are, what exactly is a roundtable? What's its purpose?
So a roundtable in general is where you get a group of sort of subject matter experts, and you bring them in, and you have sort of some like initial questions to ask, but then the audience gets to ask questions. And so instead of having one person who you ask a question and you get their answer, instead maybe an audience member asks a question that sort of fosters a conversation between the people on the panel. And so if you've been to a convention, like a sci-fi convention, a Star Trek convention, you've seen that sort of thing happen where, one of the people will get up and they'll ask, Brent Spiner about something that Data did, and LeVar Burton will say, wait a minute, Geordi wouldn't like you if you did that, and then it starts this conversation. So the same sort of thing happens at these roundtables. So Peerage Roundtable in particular is set up to help to try and demystify peerage. There's a lot of people who have what I think are sometimes are just flat out odd perceptions of peerage, but definitely some mistaken perceptions of peerage and how peerage works. How do you become a peer? How do you travel down the path of being a peer? What are the things that you can do? Those are all questions that for a long time in the SCA, I feel were deliberately obscured for a variety of different reasons. And there's been an effort among the peerage lately, or some of them anyway, to try and demystify that and try and make it a more open about, how, what was my path like, right? So my path to peerage is very different from Hillary's path to peerage, which is very different from, say, William of Fairhaven's path to peerage, or Master Fergus McPherson's path to peerage. And so having all of us there in the same room to be able to talk about our individual experiences in a group helps to inform the populace of what it's like. And of course, the answer is that everybody's path is different, but there are certain things that aren't common to most people about it, and we can talk about those things. And we can talk about them in an open way so that people can understand that they don't need to, be fearful about how they feel about certain things, or how they regard, certain things. What can they do? What can't they do? The more that we talk about this, the more open it becomes. It doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but hopefully it makes it more understandable.
Hopefully it makes it a little less intimidating to you. I think that's
Right.
part of it is, if you don't know that something is frightening and you don't feel like you have the ability to reach for it.
Right.
So in all this time, and you've talked about your path to peerage and all the things you've done throughout all of these years that you've been working with the SCA, who is somebody that has really impacted you in the way you play?
I mean, there are so many people. You can't be in the SCA for 30 years, or in any organization really for 30 years, and stick it out, right? Really be part of it without meeting just enormous numbers of people, most of whom will influence you in a positive manner. Certainly I have my very close friends, Mistress Maggie, Master Fergus, Count William, and Countess Isolde are some of my biggest supporters. I had three wonderful peers who I worked with for many years, Duchess Arabella and Mistress Amelie and Sir Thomas. And of course, Duke Rongvalder has been somebody who has been just a wonderful influence on my life. In fact, I have on Facebook, I have a cover, your cover photo. And sometimes I put up this cover photo and it says WWRD. WWWD. What would Rongvalder do? What would William do? And there have been moments where I've said to myself, I need to think about how they would handle this and try and do that, because this is something that they are very good at. And so if I can emulate their behavior, that will benefit not just me, but the person who I am talking to, or the thing that I'm trying to do, or whatever, right? And then sometimes, there's also, what would Arabella do, which is different, right? And so, but there are avatars, people who stand out as exemplars throughout the SCA, and you don't have to know them directly necessarily to know that they are, these exemplars, that they are these wonderful people. I've gotten to meet a lot of people who I don't know very well, who I only know as acquaintances, who I think are wonderful people. And so we've all got people like that.
And it's good to be surrounded by so many supportive people. That's a consistent answer I hear. There's so many in the SCA. And
I've been very, very lucky. I'm very fortunate. I'm very thankful for the support that's been shown to me by all of my friends, not just the peers and dukes and duchesses who I've had the good fortune to work with, but my friends in, just people who I know, people who I travel with, people who I hang out with, my households. Just those people. They're no less worthy and no less wonderful. They're just, they just don't happen to have fought in Crown Tournament, for example. And so I'm very fortunate to be lucky enough to know so many great, wonderful people in the SCA.
So during this time, I'm sure you've picked up a lot of stories along the way. Do you have any story? We love stories. We're all storytellers in the SCA. So do you have any fun stories or any really memorable stories that you would like to share with our audience?
Sure. So I guess I have three stories from long, long ago. Pennsic 20 and Pennsic 21. So this year was supposed to be Pennsic 49. Now it's next year is going to be Pennsic 49. So it's been 20. It's been a long time since those years. But at Pennsic 20, there are sort of two enduring memories. I was in the Rapier Legion at the time, which was a group of people who were dedicated to educating the populace of the Midrealm about fencing, which was not an authorized activity in the Midrealm at the time. And so we had a household. We sort of built this household. We all wore green scarves, and we did service. We aimed our service at the royalty, but of course, service was service for everybody. And so I was attending Tangwistal, who was queen, at the field battle. And I remember they called the lay on, and this was a hotly fought, very equally sided war that year. And so the sides were very evenly matched. And Tangwistal, in particular, was a very beloved queen of the Midrealm at the time. And, she and David, they went everywhere. And they were from Canada, so they had their coronation in Kentucky, so they had to travel farther than almost anybody to their own coronation. I mean, they were just amazing people. And I remember David running across the field in his 14th century armor. And he was very, very tall. He was like 6'3", 6'4", and he had these bright, shiny, late period plate legs. And they flashed in the sun, and he came charging around the corner of the front, right in front of where Tangwistal and the court were sort of arrayed, right? All the retainers and where the tents were, and everything, and where the pavilions were. And this great cheer went up. And I remember that being a really strong sort of medieval moment, right? We were facing away from the parking lots, and back at Pennsic 20, right? There weren't nearly as many people there, and not nearly as much of Pennsic had become sort of parking and shopping and all of that. So there wasn't a lot of mundane sort of distractions. There weren't cars going by all the time. And we were facing away from that. The fields were oriented differently back in those days. And I just remember having this sort of moment of, you get these moments where you sort of get an adrenaline rush, this burst of feeling. And I remember that being one of them, is seeing David come charging around with his two swords and his guard behind him charging, and the legs flashing in the sun. This great cheer went up. That was a great one. And then later, after the field battle, a couple days later, we had great court, and the score was tied. And the only point that was left to be decided was the Populace archery shoot. And we actually started great court without knowing what the result of the archery shoot was. They were still counting it up. And so we found out in the middle of court when the herald announced it. Nobody knew. Royalty didn't know. Only the person who came over from the archery field with the number. And then they told one of the heralds, one of the two kingdom heralds. And that was, and then we found out the Midrealm had won because of the archery shoot. And again, this great cheer went up. Back when people went to great court isn't necessarily heavily attended anymore, or final court, I guess, isn't necessarily attended very much anymore at Pennsic. And this was back when that happened more. You got awards during great court and final court, and they were given out then. And that was a great moment then. And then sort of the funny story, I guess, is the next year, the year after that, Pennsic 21, Ronan and Katja were on the throne. They're a very different king and queen from David and Tangwistal, although wonderful in their own right, but they did not have the allies that David and Tangwistal had. So we were heavily outnumbered that year by the East. And let's be fair, the East kicked the Midrealm's butt for several years between like Pennsic 16 and Pennsic 30. The East took most of those Pennsics. And I remember I was Ronan's attaché for the field battle that year. And so I'm carrying a spear with the banner attached to it, the big kingdom banner attached to it. And then we're walking along as he's reviewing the troops. And he says, "Here, hold this." And he hands me this clipboard. And on it's this piece of paper. And there's been all sorts of writing on it that's been erased and then rewritten and then erased. And finally, what was finally written on it was there was one big box said them, and one little box said us. And there was an arrow pointing from us to them. I said, "Is this the plan?" He said, "That's the plan." I'm like, "All right, that's the plan. Let's go." And, we got completely stomped. It was a lot of fun. Lots of, I wasn't a heavy fighter then, but everybody who came off the field loved it because a target-rich environment is, for an SCA person, right, an SCA fighter, you want to be in a position to have a lot of fighting, and a lot more Midrealmers got fights in than Easterners did that year. So.
All right, well, we're getting close to the end of our time now, so I do have one question that I always ask everybody at the end. And that is, if you could nominate somebody for Meet the Populace interview, who would that person be and why?
I would nominate Baron Honda of Carrigbon and his wife, Rainey, I think her name is. They have a little girl, and they live in Carrigbon, which is a smaller barony than Aeryton, and it's a little bit more remote, I guess. But they put on, so he's Baron and she's not Baroness, but they really put on a great show in that barony. They build great events. They're currently in the process of doing a virtual event this week, and they're really wonderful people. And I think people like Honda, who are very quiet, and Raina, who are very quiet, I think that they deserve a lot more attention than they get. I think that they should be showcased. They're good people.
All right, excellent. I will be sure and send them a message and see if we can get them on for an interview.
Sure.
So I want to thank everybody again for tuning in for another episode of Meet the Populace. It's been a great pleasure to have Magister Andreas with us. If you would like to nominate somebody for a Meet the Populace interview, please send that information to the email address on the bottom of your screen. Also, if you have any topics or any questions that you think would be good for Meet the Populace interviews, please send that information along as well. Once again, thank you, Magister Andreas, and I hope you have a great SCA evening.
You too. It's been a pleasure.